Listen carefully, because we're about to dismantle one of the most sacred and financially foolish dogmas of retirement. The idea that turning 60 means you must pay off all your debts immediately. I've seen intelligent people make this mistake out of sheer emotional panic, trapping themselves in a financial corner they can't get out of. It's not about loving debt. It's about understanding basic arithmetic and the critical importance of liquidity. The conventional narrative dictates that upon retirement, you should eliminate any trace of debt to sleep soundly. It sounds responsible, but it's a strategy that lacks mathematical rigor. Imagine taking $200,000 from your liquid savings and paying off your mortgage in full. You feel light and secure until, 6 months later, a medical emergency or a major home repair arises. At that moment, then you discover that your money is trapped in the bricks of your house. You can't pay for surgery with a piece of roofing. By paying off the debt completely, you've traded real flexibility for a false sense of security, leaving yourself at the mercy of unforeseen events with no cash to maneuver. We must distinguish between the different types of debt with the clinical precision of a surgeon. Credit card debt or any interest rate above 8% is a wildfire that must be extinguished immediately. It's toxic and destroys equity. However, a mortgage with a low interest rate, say 3% or 4%, isn't an emergency. It's a financial tool. If you have that money invested in a diversified portfolio yielding 7% annually, you're earning a net return of 3%. Paying off that debt not only reduces your liquidity, but also halts the process of your money growing. It is, by definition, a misallocation of capital driven by emotion, not logic. True risk management in old age isn't about being debt-free, but about keeping as many options open as possible. Debt isn't the risk. Inflexibility is. I've seen couples pay off their mortgage, and years later, when their health changes and they need specialized care, they're forced to sell their home hastily and under unfavorable market conditions because they lack liquidity. Those who maintained a manageable mortgage and kept their savings liquid can adapt, hire caregivers, or move without the pressure of a forced sale. Liquidity is the lifeblood of the personal financial system. Voluntarily cutting it off at age 60 is strategic suicide. Many financial gurus oversimplify the message because it's easy to sell. Debt is bad. Pay it all off. It's a fairy tale that ignores the reality of inflation. If you have a low-interest, fixed-rate mortgage and inflation rises, you're repaying the loan with dollars that are worth less and less, while your invested capital struggles to maintain its purchasing power. By paying off your house today, you're handing over valuable dollars to eliminate a liability that time itself will eventually erode. The wealthy don't avoid debt. They use it wisely to preserve their capital and maintain control over their most productive assets. Finally, it's crucial to understand that paying off your mortgage is an irreversible decision. Once you hand that check to the bank, the money is out of your control. If 6 months later you change your mind or need the cash, taking out a home equity loan when you're older and have a lower income is a bureaucratic and costly nightmare. Maintaining your mortgage, on the other hand, is a reversible decision. You can always decide to pay it off later if your situation changes. In the game of longevity, never give up flexibility unless you're handsomely compensated for it. Peace of mind doesn't come from a zero balance, but from the ability to respond effectively to whatever blow life throws your way. For a rational investor, the feeling of security doesn't pay medical bills or property taxes. What matters is the comparative arithmetic of opportunity cost. If you give $1 to the bank to reduce low-interest debt, that dollar stops working for you forever. It's a transfer of wealth from your pocket to the bank's balance sheet, made under the illusion of prudence. Most people fail to achieve retirement savings because they don't understand the concept of arbitrage. If your mortgage carries a 3.5% interest rate and you keep that capital invested in a balanced portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, that historically yields between 6% and 7%, you're making money simply by having debt. Paying off the mortgage in this scenario is, mathematically, a net loss of equity each year. Over a decade, the difference between paying off the house and keeping the money invested can amount to tens of thousands of dollars. You're not saving interest by paying the bank. You're missing out on the compound growth of your most valuable asset. Let's consider a real-life scenario. You have $400,000 in savings and a $150,000 mortgage outstanding at 3.5%. If you pay off the house, you'll have $250,000 left. In 10 years, at 6% annual interest, that money will grow to about $447,000. However, if you keep the $400,000 invested, after a decade, you'll have more than $716,000. Even after subtracting the monthly mortgage payments, you'll end up with significantly more liquidity and a higher net worth. Financial security isn't measured by the absence of liabilities, but by the magnitude of your liquid assets relative to your obligations. A person with more cash has greater flexibility than someone with a paid-off house and a depleted bank account. Inflation is the silent ally of anyone holding fixed-rate debt. When inflation rises, the real value of your debt decreases because you're paying it off with money that has less purchasing power than when you borrowed it. At the same time, your investments and property values tend to adjust upward with inflation. If you pay off the debt today, you're handing over today's expensive dollars to eliminate an obligation that will become much cheaper in the future. It's a basic asset allocation mistake. Wealthy people understand that low-interest debt in an inflationary environment is essentially a subsidy the lender is giving you. Another factor people overlook is the tax treatment. In many jurisdictions, mortgage interest is tax-deductible if certain requirements are met, further reducing the effective cost of debt. By paying off the house, you eliminate that deduction and increase your potential tax burden. You're trading a tax benefit and compound growth for the emotional satisfaction of seeing a zero balance. In the business world, that would be called negligent management. In personal life, it's called being conservative, but the reality is that it's a form of financial recklessness disguised as a virtue. Finally, we must address the asymmetry of risk. If the financial market experiences a 30% drop, the investor who kept their mortgage still has $280,000 in liquid assets out of the initial $400,000. It's a significant blow, but they have the resources to weather the storm. However, the person who paid off their home and was left with $250,000 after the same market decline only has $175,000 in liquid assets. Who is in a more precarious position? The individual with less debt, but also with less capacity to respond. The risk isn't market volatility. The risk is finding yourself in an emergency situation without the necessary cash to resolve it. Understanding the hierarchy of capital is what separates a successful retiree from one who ends up selling their assets at bargain prices due to a medical emergency. It's not about not owing anything, but about knowing who to pay first and how much cash to keep under the mattress so the system doesn't collapse at the first sign of trouble. There's a world of difference between good debt and bad debt. Before you touch a single dollar of your mortgage, you must surgically clean up your balance sheet. Any debt with an interest rate above 8%, credit cards, personal loans, or payday loans, is a financial cancer that will devour your future. These must be eliminated immediately, without exception. However, once that fire is extinguished, the absolute priority isn't reducing your mortgage to 3%, but building an impenetrable cash cushion. In retirement, you need at least 2 years' worth of living expenses in cash or equivalent assets. If you lock that money up in your home equity, you're sacrificing your lifeline for a medal of honor that the bank won't honor when you need a nurse at home. Healthcare planning is the factor most conservatives completely ignore. Medicare and standard insurance don't cover everything. Home care and long-term care facilities are obscenely expensive. A $7,000 a month check for memory care can wipe out a savings account in 3 years if you have a $500,000 mortgage but only $100,000 in the bank. You'll be forced to sell your home under immense time pressure, losing market value because of the rush. On the other hand, if you maintain a small mortgage and keep $400,000 in cash, you have control over timing and decisions. Liquidity gives you the freedom to choose how and where you receive care. A mortgage only provides a roof over your head, not food. They should think in terms of scenarios, not absolutes. Ask themselves, what if I need $50,000 in 6 months? Someone with a paid-off mortgage and little cash would have to take out a loan, difficult to obtain on retirement income, or sell off assets at a loss. Someone with manageable debt and liquidity simply withdraws the money. Peace of mind doesn't come from the absence of debt, but from having options. By the time you reach 60, your ability to generate new income is limited, so every spending decision should be reversible. Paying off the mortgage is irreversible. Keeping the money invested and making the monthly payment is a strategy you can change at any time if tax laws or your health require it. The feel-good for 6 months mistake is a biological trap. Paying off your mortgage gives your brain a dopamine rush for the accomplishment, but that feeling quickly evaporates when property taxes rise or the home insurance market becomes prohibitively expensive. True financial security is boring, technical, and based on cash flow, not lien-free property titles. Don't let the advice of friends or gurus who don't understand financial arbitrage dictate your retirement. In the real world, those with the cash call the shots, and those with all their capital tied up in bricks and mortar are prisoners of their own misguided prudence. We've reached the end of this lesson in financial realism. Don't be fooled by the emotional satisfaction of seeing your debt go to zero if it means your bank account is also empty. Retirement isn't a state of rest. It's a survival game where the only rule that matters is maintaining control over your assets until your last breath. The most common mistake after 60 is believing that the risk disappears when you pay off your mortgage. It's exactly the opposite. The risk changes form. By depleting your savings to pay off the house, you become house rich, cash poor. I've seen retirees with $500,000 homes struggle to pay for a plumbing repair or a large heating bill. A house isn't an ATM. It's a drain on expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance, that requires constant liquidity to sustain. Without cash, the property becomes a heavy burden that dictates your quality of life rather than enhancing it. Consider the scenario of a couple who need to move to be near their children for health reasons. If their house is paid off and the real estate market drops by 20%, they're stuck. They can't sell without losing a fortune, and they don't have the cash to buy in their new location. However, if they had maintained their mortgage and kept their equity invested, they would have the necessary capital to make the move without relying solely on the sale of their current property. The flexibility to change your mind or your location is an asset that doesn't appear on the balance sheet but is worth more than any savings on mortgage interest. Tax laws are fickle, and what seems like a sensible decision today could be a disaster tomorrow. By holding a mortgage, you retain the option of taking advantage of tax deductions that could disappear or become more valuable as legislation changes. Once the debt is paid off, that tax optimization tool is lost forever. Sophisticated investors never forgo a tax advantage unless the benefit of doing so is overwhelming. In most cases of low-interest mortgages, the benefit simply isn't there. It's a net loss of financial efficiency for a momentary emotional gain. Let's talk about death from lack of options. In old age, problems don't give warning. A degenerative disease, a global economic crisis, or a drastic change in household expenses can happen at any time. The person with $300,000 in a brokerage account and a $1,500 a month mortgage can adjust their lifestyle, withdraw capital, or even pay off the debt if necessary. The person who used that $300,000 to pay off the house no longer has those options. They played their best card too soon and are left defenseless for the rest of the game. Compound interest is a force of nature that doesn't discriminate by age, but it requires time and capital to operate. Every dollar you take from your investment portfolio to pay down a 3% debt is a dollar that could potentially multiply to 7% or 8%. Over a 20-year retirement period, that difference can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars less in your final net worth. You're not being conservative by paying off the house. You're destroying your own future wealth. True prudence lies in letting your money work where it's most efficient, not where it causes you the least short-term anxiety. Social pressure and coffee shop advice are enemies of rationality. Many retirees pay off their debts because their friends did, or because their parents taught them that debt is inherently bad. But their parents lived in an era of radically different interest rates and economic conditions. Following outdated advice in a modern environment of low rates and persistent inflation is a recipe for regret. They must have the intellectual integrity to ignore the crowd and follow the numbers. Financial success often requires the willingness to be the oddball who does things differently from the average person. Liquidity also allows you to seize opportunities that others miss due to a lack of cash. Even at 70, attractive investment opportunities or urgent family needs requiring immediate capital can arise. Having access to your money allows you to act as a lender of last resort for your own family or for your own interests. A property title is useless for taking advantage of a market opportunity. Cash on hand is. Keeping your cash reserves dry is both a defensive and offensive strategy. Don't voluntarily deplete your resources just when you might need them most. Inflation is the great equalizer. If you owe $100,000 today, in 10 years that debt will be much easier to repay with the inflation-adjusted income from your investments. By paying today, you're giving the bank the benefit of currency devaluation. It's essentially a gift you're giving to a multi-billion-dollar financial institution at the expense of your own inheritance or standard of living. Banks love customers who pay off their low-interest mortgages early. It allows them to lend that money at much higher rates to other people. Don't help the bank improve its balance sheet at your expense. Temperament is the deciding factor. If the thought of having a mortgage is keeping you up at night, then pay off the house, but accept that you're paying an extremely high peace-of-mind tax. However, for anyone who aspires to rationality, the solution isn't paying off the debt, but rather cultivating their temperament. Understand that structured, low-interest debt is a sound financial position, not a weakness. True peace of mind should come from knowing you have enough cash to cover any contingency, not from having a clean balance sheet, but an empty bank account. Finally, remember that retirement is a marathon, not a sprint. Your money needs to last as long as you do, and possibly longer if you want to leave a legacy. The strategy that maximizes survival and growth is the one that preserves optionality and access to capital. Paying off debt after 60 is a final decision. Maintaining it is a daily choice you can change if circumstances require it. Always choose the option that keeps you in control. Control is the only real security in this uncertain world.